Some more breaking news. Thousands of Bank of America customers got a surprise when they couldn't see their account balances online.
This is after a widespread outage. Naveen Dhaliwal is live in Midtown with more. Naveen.
Yeah, Dick, they sure got a surprise this morning and into the afternoon as many logged onto their app. That balance came out as zero. Again, this was online, not at the local Bank of America branches. Now, this all started this morning, according to reports, and it spiked around 12:45 p.m., according to Down Detector, which collects data on outages. Now, during that time, customers logging onto their Bank of America app had issues. Some were experiencing that balance of zero, nothing, no money in their bank account.
Thousands of people experienced widespread outage, affecting their mobile and online banking accounts. Experts suggest ways to be prepared in case an outage like this occurs again.
Time to kind of take action. You want to be transparent with the landlord that you might have, or any bills that you have to pay. You're right. There is usually a grace period, but sometimes there isn't.
Bank of America experienced a global online outage earlier Wednesday afternoon, affecting hundreds of thousands of people. Some were unable to access their accounts, and others were even seeing a $0 balance. Brian Ullman suggests in times like these, taking inventory of your finances is important.
Keep track of your statements. I think also in this digital world, we get it in an email and we tend to delete those things. But having your statements that are oftentimes emailed to you or accessible online, keep copies of those, because that's a record of your finances. And so if there is a problem with your glitches being straightened out at your bank, you at least have a record and something that can back up your claims.
Bank of America releasing a statement that said, in part, some clients are experiencing an issue accessing their accounts and balance information today. These issues are being addressed and have largely been resolved. We apologize for any inconvenience. Bank of America did not specify what caused the outage.
This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. This story might sound familiar to you. Bank of America has had an outage, as most of you probably heard by now, where people were going to their bank accounts and it was showing zero. People were trying to buy groceries at the grocery store, and their cards were getting declined. Their debit cards were showing that they had $0 in them. People were at the gas station trying to pump gas and were left with no gas because their bank accounts were at zero. And this is the world that we live in now, where we've trusted in banks, where we take these things for granted, where we think we can trust in these corporations when we put our money in there to actually have our money available to us. But think again, because this is what the future looks like. You may have noticed as well that while people's bank accounts were at zero during this quote unquote glitch, their debts weren't at zero. Their debts were still showing up. So their debts were there, but their cash wasn't. And you also may be somebody who has noticed over the last couple of years, when you actually go to the bank and try to withdraw a decent amount of money, a few $100s, maybe a few $1,000s, that the bank actually asks you what in the world you're taking your money out for, forgetting that it's yours in the first place. And it wasn't just Bank of America who had this outage. JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo also reported a very similar situation that was occurring. So does it surprise anybody that Bank of America, who is a partner with the World Economic Forum, would have an issue like this? Because this isn't the first one. I'm going to show you the pattern here so you can see how they're preparing you for your bank account to be at zero. Don't forget about all these things they discuss with a reset. How many times have we heard people talk about a reset, but they don't realize that the reset is more than just the outbreak that they caused. They want everybody to be equal. They want equality, right? Well, they're literally talking about everybody's bank accounts being at zero so that they can have their universal basic income, where we all get a little allowance from the elites, where we could buy a plant-based burger once a week and eat some bugs, as they like to say. So Bank of America is obviously a partner with the World Economic Forum. And of course, no surprise, who are the main shareholders of Bank of America? You have Berkshire Hathaway, but then you got Vanguard and BlackRock, right? And you might remember back in the beginning of this year, there was a lot of these data breach stories that were coming out. Bank of America, AT&T, Bank of America had a huge data breach, which again, they don't need to tell you about these things. They're preparing you for these things. They're preparing you for a digital ID where they tell you that all this stuff will be secure, where you won't have to worry about data breaches or your bank accounts being hacked. The only thing that'll really be hacked, of course, is you and your mind. But this actually occurred. For anyone out there that doesn't remember, I want to show you the pattern here. In 2023, Bank of America had the same exact issue. People were reporting that their bank accounts were showing zero back in 2023, January of 2023, where they were logging into their accounts and there was no money. Here's a news clip.
So many Bank of America customers are taking to social media right now. They're reporting that they woke up to money missing from their accounts. Well, B of A just posted this message to their app saying that it's because Zelle transactions made between January 14th and January 17th may be delayed or not posted altogether. They add that they're working on fixing this problem and that transactions will be posted as soon as possible and appear in your account activity and balance. They apologize for the inconvenience, but all you have to do is search Bank of America on your social media feed and see that that is not enough for those people that are reporting, in some cases, negative bank accounts.
So this isn't the first time that this has happened to Bank of America, and we're starting to see a pattern here with these types of things. Now, while all this was going on, while Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and JP Morgan were reporting outages, we also had Verizon customers who were reporting major outages and were unable to use their phone or do certain things on their phones. The PlayStation Network was offline, which of course would probably cause mass chaos because how could any of these 30 or 40-year-olds get on the internet to play video games while the world's burning around us? So that probably caused a lot of people to short circuit as well. So what's also interesting to note with this is that it was strictly online, that people who showed up to the bank were not having these issues. It was strictly through accessing your bank account over the internet, which would make you would think people say to themselves, you know what, I don't want to deal with the internet anymore. But they know how obsessive people are with the internet. They know that that's not a thought process for anybody. When they go to the gas pump and they have no gas, that they can't get gas put in their car, their brain doesn't say, you know what, I should take all my money out of the bank and I should keep it underneath the mattress at my home. Well, on the flip side, all of those people are fearful to do something like that because they see that the government is allowing criminals to run amok. So the government themselves would probably tip off the criminals since they work together and tell them, hey, yo, so-and-so took $10,000 out of the bank and they've got it at their house somewhere. Why don't you go there and go and get it, right? Because that's how this entire thing works. So people are more fearful to even hold their own money. And it's really a lose-lose situation for everybody, isn't it? You know, you're afraid to keep your money at home because you're afraid of a robber, while at the same time the government will probably put you in jail if somebody does break into your home and try to take your $10,000 or your $200 that you have under your mattress. Because if you actually pull a gun on them to protect yourself and your money, well, the government is likely to say that the person robbing your home was a victim. And they'll throw you in jail for owning a gun or pulling a gun out on a poor defenseless criminal who is unarmed, right? So this is the predicament we find ourselves in. And they know this because we've yielded all power over to them. So they could do things like this. They can run experiments like this. They can play games like this. And you might remember in the beginning of the summer in July, we had the world's largest tech crash happening all at once, right? We had banks that were down. We had airlines that were not able to fly. We had hospitals down. This was a mass IT outage. We had 911 services that were offline, so you weren't able to call 911. This is another common theme that we've heard throughout the last year or so. And even if you just do a basic Google search now, you'll see these stories are still popping up in random places. That 911 is down, so anybody in this county, anybody in this state will not be able to use 911, and it just continues and continues and continues. We had the AT&T hacking that occurred. We even had, of course, during the CrowdStrike glitch, they put stories out there about how the U.S. federal agencies also had an outage. So the Justice Departments weren't able to get online. They were getting the blue screen of death Oh my goodness, they could have potentially been hacked. And this is really where the narrative heads, right? While your bank account is at zero, while Bank of America has not come out and said that there was a cyber attack, they have told you in the past that there's major data breaches on their end, right? But they haven't come out yet and said anything about what's occurring. But naturally, every single person, because they've been programmed, the first thing they're thinking of is a cyber attack. Naturally, right? That's what every one of us is thinking. Why? Because they programmed this into us. They've ingrained it into us. And they've told us this stuff, right? The World Economic Forum keeps telling us that we need to be ready for a major cyber attack. Well, that's not because they are just looking out for us and they know what's coming. It's because they're planning a major cyber attack, just like they told us ahead of the outbreak that there was going to be an outbreak, because these are the people planning it. Here they are talking about just how badly they could bring countries to their knees with a major cyber attack. And all that would really be is them shutting everything off. Because if they shut everything off, they shut your bank account off, they know nobody has money stashed, and what does it even matter if you have cash saved up with the grid completely shut off? You won't be able to access anything. Nobody can farm on their own. Nobody has water on their own. They have full control, and they know it. Here they are telling you about their planned cyber attack.
Global Security Outlook Report 2023. This is a result of research in collaboration with the forum's communities and our partner Accenture, in which we've interviewed and sought input from over 300 executives globally. The most striking finding that we found is that 93% of cyber leaders and 86% of cyber business leaders believe that the geopolitical instability makes a catastrophic cyber event likely in the next 2 years.
But still, pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services. Our society as a whole would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack.
And of course, in addition to all of these other things that we've seen, because there is a huge pattern here, and that's why I want to show you in this video. I pulled up all those screenshots of these things to remind you of this mass conditioning, right? Because when you start remembering all these things, because nobody expects you to remember that there was a 2023 Bank of America outage of the same, it was the same exact story. That people went to their bank accounts, they weren't able to access anything, they tried to use Zeal and send money, they were not able to, right? Nobody remembers this. We have enough chaos going on in our day-to-day lives, and we're getting fed so much propaganda 24/7. It's hard to remember stories from 3 months ago, right? So then when I show you all these stories of all these outages, you look at the patterns here with Verizon then being offline. We've had the stuff with AT&T, the PlayStation Network. Pretty much every single thing suddenly is either offline or being compromised, where they're telling you that there's these huge data breaches, and the digital ID is around the corner. The digital ID plays a factor into all of this stuff, because the more they tell you about these cyber attacks, your bank account's going to zero, and they threaten you and say, look, this could end up happening to you. This could end up with a cyber attack. Your account could be at zero. And you even heard, they're talking about, hey, you're going to need a paper trail, right? How many people out there have a paper trail of how much money is in their bank account? 0 people? Do you know anybody out there that's really keeping? I mean, maybe you are who listen to my channel. But let's just say, think of if you found 100 people, how many of them have a paper statement? 1, maybe 2, only because they probably haven't opted out yet. But a lot of the banks actually stopped sending statements in the mail. First, they wanted you to opt out because they wanted you to save money on trees and told you it was eco-friendly, so people believe that. Right? And then they just said, well, we're not doing it anymore because nobody wants it anymore. Kind of like how they're forcing us into digital payments, where they're saying, well, nobody pays with cash anymore, so we're not going to do it anymore. And what it takes is a massive pushback from people to make them go, all right, we'll accept cash at these places. All right, we'll accept checks at these places. Right? But nobody really ever pushes back on any of this stuff, so they can continue to move forward. They can continue to say, well, we're not going to send you paperless statements anymore. But because nobody out there has paperless statements, okay, if they did a grid shutdown like I've warned about for years, of 3 months or 6 months, every single person would expect when the grid came back on that their bank account would show how much money they have, right? And if it was to go on and it was to show $0, what are any of the civilians going to do about it? Nothing, right? What, if they're in a rich community, what are they going to do? Go protest with their signs, picket outside of Bank of America or Wells Fargo while these people hide underground, and then they know after about 2 months you'll just give up and you'll accept what they tell you actually didn't happen, but they'll tell you it did. They'll say there was a major data breach. There's no way to recover it. We all need to band together and move forward together, and everybody will just accept it. Now, people forget about this when it comes to a Great Reset. Part of the plan of the Great Reset is literally to reset your bank account, to get everybody on an equal playing field. And half of our country will be okay with it. Well, at least they say they will be. There's a lot of Dems out there who don't have a clue about what's actually going on. So once they see that they can't go, these 40-year-old men can't go and buy their He-Man toys from when they were kids all of a sudden with their money that they have saved up, or go buy fancy cars, well, they'll be bothered by it. But it'll pass. It's just like those protests I showed over in France months and months ago, right? Where everyone was like, oh man, there's going to be this massive overthrow in France. They're going after building, there was just chaos going on. They just wait it out because eventually nothing ends up occurring. The government uses the military to subdue the civilians. The civilians eventually get so worn out by it that they accept it. And that's exactly what I believe is going to eventually occur. When they do shut the grid down for a period of time, people will be so thrilled just to have electricity again when they turn it back on that, yes, they'll be upset with their bank accounts, but nobody will even know the exact amount of money that was in their bank account because some of it was in the stock market and some of it was over there, some of it was here, right? There won't be a real paper trail. And even if there is one, the banks will say, look, we don't have anything anymore. We need to change the entire currency structure. We all have to start fresh. And people will be angry, of course, but people will do nothing about it. There will be no revolution. They'll accept it. And they know this because guess what? The outbreak that just occurred, that was a precursor for a lot more to come, including the carbon footprint. And they watched during that how many people complied. Were there any massive protests? Absolutely not. Did people rebel against what they were doing when they were quarantining or locking people down? Maybe, but guess what? The majority of us who went out without masks on, what ended up happening? People came up to you and complained. If you were on an airplane, they told you better pull it up over your nose or they'll throw you off the plane. All of these foot soldiers served the purpose of the globalists and prevented anybody out there from not wearing a mask or things like that. And then, even if people like me and you were like, screw this, I'm not following their quarantine, what are you going to do at 8 or 9 o'clock at night when every single store is closed? So what? Maybe you went to a park? Okay, wow, real rebellious, right? Nobody was there to do anything to stop you from being at the park because everybody else was too afraid to go there. So you were literally out there by yourself. But if you wanted to go to a store at 8 or 9 o'clock, they were all shut down at curfew, which was 6 o'clock. So even people who tried to go against it weren't able to do anything about it because the corporations were running and controlling everything. And then you look at what happened in other countries, people who did go out past curfew were getting arrested for it. So they know that you might be upset for a little bit, but they know what's best for all of us, right? And they're the ones who are doing this while we all look at each other distract. Now this, obviously I'm going down the line here, talking about a Bank of America, having an outage where people's balances are at zero. But look how people are responding to it. People are a little bit upset about it, but they're becoming so desensitized to this. That's the point, right? The more desensitized you become to these things, they watch how people respond. They watch somebody, like some of these stories out there, we're talking to specific individuals who are held up at the grocery, held up at the pumps. They're trying to get gas and then they couldn't get gas and they were literally stuck in the parking lot. They go, I tried calling them, they didn't answer. I tried holding them, they didn't answer, right? Because that's all you're gonna do. And they know this. They could get away with whatever they want. And they love watching how people respond to these experiments that they run because there's a bigger one that's coming. So every time they do something like this, they see, how are you responding? Remember, we're the data that they study. Okay? How are you responding? Are you going somewhere? Are you getting angry? Are you trying to start some type of organize something big against the bank or against so-and-so for doing? No, nobody's doing anything. So they could sit there and put your bank account at zero and then on top of it, which was definitely deliberately done, hold the middle finger up in your face and say, look, your bank account shows zero, but your debt's still there. Because that was one of the big stories that was out there. People go, my bank account's at zero. Why is my debt showing up though? Well, that's them just going, hi, holding up a middle finger at you. Because they know that the civilians aren't going to do anything about it. And the more that they're silencing people online, most people are just confused about what's going on. Most people don't know about how all these banks, what they're planning here with the carbon footprint, which is going to give banks authority over freezing your bank account when you go and try to purchase something that's above your allotted carbon emissions. Nobody understands how this works yet. And that's one of the things I've been warning about. Bank of America is in bed, okay, with the World Economic Forum. All of the banks are. There's no real independent bank unless you might have a small bank in your town, which still is, they're trying to bankrupt those, right? We've seen a lot of the stories about the small banks going under, and the small banks can't even cover the majority of money that most people have in their accounts. They can't insure it. So you're looking at this whole thing and you're saying to yourself, well, what are my options really? Well, the options are to break free from the entire system. Break free from the internet, break free from the banks. They hold all control because we've given them control. We've given them control. And we can't sit here and not say, look at it and say, well, it's hypocritical, right? Because I'm online doing this, you're online listening to this. And until we all break away from it fully, they're going to have control because the control they have is via the internet. And the addiction, the worst addiction in the history of humankind is the internet. They'll never tell you that out in the open. They've deliberately got people hooked by putting all these things on the internet. People are hooked. People cannot go a day without electricity, and it's mainly because of the internet. They care more about the internet than they do about running water, okay? So they don't expect people to suddenly go, you know what, we're going to get offline and we're going to go back to an old way of living. We're going to barter. We're going to keep money on our own. We're not going to put it in the banks anymore because they can't be trusted. They know nobody's going to do it. That's why they can continue to run these tests and these experiments until the big one comes. And this is Bank of America, once again, with people's bank accounts at zero, people just complaining online, doing nothing about it. The biggest thing most people did was pick up a phone so they could talk to artificial intelligence on the other end at Bank of America, right? It's absolutely ridiculous because something big is coming. I think we all know it. Leave the World Behind. We've seen all the programming in these films before.
Police, fire, and emergency medical services will be unavailable. Police, fire, and emergency medical services will be unavailable. Police, fire, and emergency medical services will be unavailable.
We are seeing ongoing cyber attacks across the country.
What just happened here is happening everywhere. We need to get to that bunker Danny told us about, and we need to get there now. You know something? I had a sneaking suspicion, but I wanted more information first. All the signs were there, sure, but I didn't want to scare anyone. Call me crazy because it is crazy. It would have made more sense if we were on the brink of an all-out invasion. I didn't think we'd actually let something like this happen. I thought we were smarter than that. My primary client works in the defense sector. I spent a lot of time cost-benefit analysis of military campaigns. There was one program in particular that terrified my client the most. A simple 3-stage maneuver that could topple a country's government from within. The first stage was isolation. Disable their communication and transportation. Make the target as deaf, dumb, and paralyzed as possible. For the second stage, synchronized chaos. Terrorize them with covert attacks and misinformation. Overwhelming their defense capabilities, leaving their weapon systems vulnerable to extremists in their own military. Without a clear enemy or motive, people would start turning on each other. The third stage would happen on its own. What's the third stage? A coup d'etat. Civil war. Collapse. This program was considered the most cost-effective way to destabilize a country. Because if the target nation was dysfunctional enough, it would, in essence, do the work for you. Whoever started this wants us to finish it.
Wait now. All the roads are blocked. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do right now. I can barely do anything without my cell phone and my GPS. I am made useless, man.
About massive grid shutdowns and how that could destroy infrastructure. And that's what they're planning, to destroy infrastructure. And how are they going to destroy infrastructure? They're going to destroy infrastructure by shutting everything off, hitting every single state they possibly can with weaponized weather to literally destroy the buildings so they have to rebuild the buildings, hitting places like Lahaina with directed energy weapons, allowing criminals to run free, allowing addicts to sit in the road and shoot up. These are all things they're deliberately doing to bring down the infrastructure. So a story like this ties into it completely. People's bank accounts are at zero. Don't forget the other stories out there about how the banks were freezing people's bank accounts in Canada. These are all things that are coming because all power has been yielded over to these institutions, to the banks, to the corporations, to the internet providers, to big tech, because everybody's addicted to social media. And thus now they could play with us like they could play us like a fiddle. And that's what they're going to do. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless all of you as always and your families.